Okay, so now that we have an idea of what bearing is, here's some bearing word problems. There's quite a few in this homework set. Again, it's going to be very important that you draw a picture. All right, and then as you'll see, sometimes we get really lucky, and but let's go ahead and see that. So for starters, what we have here in this first one, we have two ships leaving a port at the same time. So let's go ahead. There's our manner of perspective, if you would. So here's the port, right? That dot represents our port. All right, and then the first ship sails on a bearing of 32 degrees. So since that's singular, that means we're talking about the first bearing where we're going to be going. How about I draw another? Right, so we're going to think of true north. Right, so there's my true north. And since we're going 32 degrees, right, that means from true north, the first ship is 32 degrees in true north. Right, so here's ship number 1, and it's traveling. This is a speed at 10 knots. So that's going to be important for us in a moment. So it's traveling at a speed of 10 knots, nautical miles per hour, if you would, in that direction. All right. So there's the first ship. Right, ship number 1. Now the next ship, right? Well, we're told about it. The second ship is leaving the same port, but its bearing is 122 degrees at a different speed. So this means we're actually going to go past 90 degrees, right, and then about 122, right about in there. So this ship's bearing, right, there's 122 degrees, and it's basically going in this direction, right, at 15 knots. Okay, so there's ship number 2. All right, so again, we're talking about the bearing related to north, and we're rotating 32 degrees north for the first direction and 122 degrees in the bearing for the second ship's direction. And what they want to know is how far apart are they after 2 hours. So if you take a look at my drawing, we're basically looking right at that distance right there, right? So what is that distance after 2 hours? Okay, so you can kind of see what we have here. Let me highlight it in the red pen that I have. We actually have, right, a triangle. And so we can start doing is some of our triangle relationships. So that distance, you know, we could do all kinds of things, but if we look, right, we can basically figure out what is that angle right there. And so if we basically take the 122 degree rotation and subtract the 32 degree rotation, 0, carry the 1, lo and behold, we find that that angle right there is actually a 90 degree angle. Whew. All right, so let's reorientate ourselves, right? So after all that language and looking at my drawing, we actually have a 90 degree angle. We're heading 15 knots in this direction. We're heading 10 knots in the other direction, right? And we want to know what's this distance, right? What's D in 2 hours? All right, so there's basically a reorientation trying to get us back to something we know. So the next step is we actually have to find what's this distance and what's this distance, right? Because if I can find those, then I can find that distance. Well, this is a speed, right? And what we know in terms of distance is rate times time. So this distance right here would be 10 times 2. So that means that this person, right, traveled 20 nautical miles, all right, going in this direction. And the other one, since they were traveling at 15 knots, right, distance equals rate times time, this is 15 times 2, that means they were traveling 30 nautical miles in that. So I don't need any trig anymore, right? What I basically have is a right triangle where I know one side, I know the other side. The distance we're trying to find is basically the Pythagorean theorem. So we got 20 squared plus 30 squared equals that distance squared. And I think that's 400 plus 900, right? D is equal to 1300. Oops, I forgot my square root. All right, and I think D, that's 100 times 13. So D is 10 square roots of 13, right? And this is nautical miles. And that's a 10 right there. Okay, so there would be an exact answer. So how far is that person? 10 square roots of 13. If you wanted to get a decimal, right, we'd reach for our calculator, right? And we're talking about 10 and the square root of 13, and that gives us basically 36, right? So they're roughly 36 nautical miles apart from each other. So whereas this one in 2 hours is 20 nautical miles down the way, so 20 miles in that direction, this person's gone 30 miles in that direction. They are basically roughly about 36 miles apart, 36 and change, right? I think it was 0.05555, right? So you got your exact answer and you got your estimated answer. Again, we got real lucky. We drew a picture, looked at it real closely, and found that the distance I was looking for happens to be the opposite side of a 90-degree angle, and that really helped us out tremendously. Okay, so why don't we start fresh with the next video? We're using our other bearing notation, but I'd like to start you guys fresh with just a new let's reset ourselves. So another video coming with number 3.